So, oh my God, I've pain in my face. That was excellent. I really enjoyed that. Really good, Sean. And some of the phrases were like pure poetry, and then the imagery was really good as well. Just loved it. So Daniel Payne is up next, and let me tell you a little bit about Daniel as I ask him to unmute. So Daniel is a musician and a storyteller from Cowhead on the island of Newfoundland. He lived in Ireland, Cork City, for years after high school, immersing himself in traditional music. Upon returning home, he realized that there was still a living tradition in his hometown, and since then he has enjoyed taking part in that tradition, playing for dances, learning old songs and tunes, and hearing lots of great stories. And often in the cozy and casual setting of the Newfoundland and Labrador rural home. He's happy to be taking part in this event, which we can enjoy in the same way in our own homes. Isn't that lovely? So, can you take it away, Daniel? I can't wait to see what you have to offer us.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. I've been standing at my sister's kitchen sink because it has the best light, but the sun is just starting to go down now, so it's getting a little bit intense. If I lean over here, it gets kind of intense. That's if you can even see my video. Where I am, we don't have fiber up internet yet, so it's a bit of an experiment to see if this will actually work. And I was just going to maybe do a little tune at the end and tell a very quick old story that was told by a man here named Freeman Bennett. He's from a community just one community south of here, Cowhead, or as it used to be called, Tête de Vache. The French had fishing rights to this area of the coast, and a lot of the names that you see around Newfoundland, they're connected with French and Basque, and they really reflect a whole host of different influences on that. So I find that really fascinating about living here. So Freeman was from St. Paul's, just to the south of here, and between him and his wife Becky, the two of them knew hundreds of songs, and Freeman knew lots of old stories. So I thought that I could tell you maybe one of his old stories, but I just wanted to say first that it's really nice just to connect with over in Ireland again. I just really warms my heart. The little bit of time that I spent in Cork City was really great. I got to know a fiddle player there named Seamus Cray, and I thought of him a lot tonight. I met him the very first night I was in Cork. I got to Cork. I got to Ireland. I didn't know where I was going to go. People told me Galway was really nice, and they said Seamus Cray lives in Cork. He had friends in Newfoundland, and he actually recorded a beautiful album called Came the Dawn over in Newfoundland. Anyway, so the bus to Cork went first, so I went to Cork. But the very first night I was there, I went into the Spalpeen Phonic, and there was Seamus playing in the snug there with some other musicians, probably Mick Daly, maybe Aidan Coffey. And so I just by chance met him that very first night, and he helped me out, then got me a place to stay with some friends. And so anyway, and also I wanted to say Kerry as well. I was in Kerry in Listowel there a couple of years ago with a traveling theater show, and we were at a pub there that night, and John B. Keane was there as well. And it was, I think, toward the end of his life, and but he made it out to the pub, and everybody there was really, all the local people there were really happy that he was there, and impressed that he had made it out. So that's another nice connection to Listowel anyway. So again, thanks for inviting me, and I'll just launch in and try to do this story without taking too long. Well, anyway, it's an old story, and it is from around here. And if you can put your mind to what it's like in Newfoundland for 6 months of the year, maybe sometimes it feels like maybe literally 6 months of the year, there's snow on the ground. And for a good portion of that, maybe 4 months, there's a significant amount of snow. And it changes the landscape into a whole abstract landscape of there's hills where there wouldn't have been hills before. And you can be standing sort of 10 feet up in the air in February looking at your yard from an angle you never ever noticed it from in the summer because you're so much higher in the air. Anyway, so maybe you can put a bit of that into the picture of this adventure. It's an old Jack story again from Freeman. So it's from once upon a time, and of course not in my time and not in your time, but times long ago. And there was a little fellow named Jack, and Jack lived with his mother and father, and they lived not far from here. They just had a little tilt and just made a real sort of a meager living. But even in their meager living, they ran upon hard times. And then one day, Jack's mother said, you know, she said, Father, Jack, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of this because, you know, we're starving. We got nothing to eat. And well, Jack's father said, yeah, he figured she was right. He figured they should go. And so they got ready and they packed up their food. Now, all their food was they had a bun apiece, just a bun of bread apiece, and or a dough bun, you know, one each. And there might have been a little square of pork fat in it. I don't even know if they had that left. And if it was just by fluke, like it got stuck in the pot, there might have been an old raisin or something. But other than that, it was just a bit of flour and water, maybe a little tiny sugar or something in there. Anyway, that's all they had. And Jack's father gave him a little gun, a little 22 gun, just a little gun for hunting small birds and things. So anyway, they started off. Now they went along so far, and it was getting hard going now because the snow was starting to get a bit deep. So they were kind of going along, and they got into going along, and they got into a little bit of drifting. It's getting hard going now, especially for Jack's parents. And by, he seen the settlement, and he knew they were getting close to. It was probably, I believe, might have been up around Belburn somewhere. And anyway, he said, now Mom and Dad, now Jack had it in his mind. He had been feeling this way for a while, that he had to branch off and do his own thing, and he was just at the right age. And he said, now Mom and Dad, you got to go down to the settlement. You know, we got relatives down there, and they'll set you up, and you'll be safe and sound. But I got to go out and seek me fortune. And so, well, they didn't like it. Jack's mother, she didn't like that very much, and his father, he didn't like it either. But now Jack, he managed to convince them. And so off they went down to the settlement, and I think it was her sister was down there. His mother's sister was his aunt. So they went on, and then Jack, he turned and he set off in toward the hills. So he was going and going along, and according as he got in closer to the hills, it actually warmed up a little bit as he got away from the coast. So he took off his little Guernsey that he had on, and he was doing pretty good. And he went up, and he came up to the top of a big hill. And now it was starting to get around dark, and he seen a light over the other side. So he said, I better go over and take a look. And so we went down into the little valley and then up again this other hill. And as he got closer, he seen it was a house. As he got closer, he realized it was a huge house. And the light was shining out through these big windows. And he went up to the door, and it was closed, but the door was so big that there was just a little knot hole in the wood, and he was able to look in. And so he peered in, and there was 3 giants. Now, back then they had giants, you know, really giant people. I don't know, 25 feet tall maybe. And they were sitting in this huge house, and they were all sat down to a table eating a huge piece of mutton. And they were scrabbling right into it. And Jack said he looked at that mutton. That was actually the main thing on his mind. He was so hungry at that point. He said, well, I'd love to be able to get even like a little bit of that mutton. So he got a little plan as he was looking in. He took his 22, and the giant on the right-hand side, he gave the giant a shot and hit him in the neck. Now, he hit the guy on the right, but the guy on the right looked over and figured it was the other giant next to him. He said, now what'd you do that for? And the giant next to him, he said, what? He said, I didn't do that. He said, yes, you did. You fired something at me. I never fired nothing at you. Yes, you did, he said, and don't fire it no more or I'll chop your head off with this big knife. Whoa, well, Jack said, that's promising. So he looked around. There was a lot of knot holes. Must have been a big pine or something. They found a lot of knot holes, and he got a different angle, and he hit the same fellow again. Well, he said, you're at it again. Now you hit me again. And so he took his big knife and he chopped the fellow's head off. Well, Jack said, now he's down to 2 giants. So he found another knot hole, and he tried the trick again. Did a couple times, and he managed to get that giant mad, and he whacked off the other fellow's head. Now there was only 1. Now Jack, at this point, his judgment was not so good. So he thought, well, he couldn't think of a better idea. He thought, maybe I'll just take another shot. So he shot, and the giant, whoop, whoop. But this time, he knew it wasn't either of the giants. He had already chopped off their heads. So now he figured something was afoot. And so he came out and opened the door, and Jack whipped behind it. But by and by, the giant looked, and Sir Jack started to run. But I mean, he was only moving centimeters by the giant's, perspective. So he just reached down and whisked Jack up, and he brought him in. And he said, "Now," he said, "my son, I got you, and I'm gonna eat you now." And Jack said, "No, hold on." He said, if you spare my life, he said, I got this little 22 gun, that little thing I was firing at you with. And he said, I'm a real good hand with it. And if you want, I can prove it to you. And if you will spare my life, I'll show you what I can do. And so the giant said, well, he figured he'd humor him. He said, Jack, I'll set up all these candles now in a row. And if you can fire one shot and dout them all, he said, then I'll spare your life, I think. So Jack knew the trick of it. He just got around so that they were all in a line, one shot, and he managed to dout them all. He was a pretty good shot by this time. Anyhow, the giant said, okay, well, very good, Jack. He said, I'm going to keep you around. You might be useful. He said, there's a castle not far from here, and there's a princess. And I tries to go up and get the princess. But every time I does it, there's a cat that wakes everybody up. And he said, Jack, can you use that little thing to fire at that cat and kill that cat? And Jack said, well, yes, he could do it. Of course, he was going to say he could do it. He didn't really want to kill the cat, though. So anyway, according as it got late and dark, and a little bit darker, they went on, and he got to the castle, and it was a great big old castle again. And same thing, there was a hole in the door. They couldn't have been repairing the doors very good in those parts back in those days. So anyway, they looked in, and the giant said, look, now that's the little cat there. And sure enough, Jack looked in, there was a cat there lying underneath a big pendulum and a big old grandfather clock with a pendulum. And so Jack thought, what if I'll shoot the pendulum? And so that's what he did. He shot the pendulum, and it came down, landed on the cat, and the cat sort of was scared and went legs up in the air. And the giant figured he must have killed her. So he said, now, Jack, now that you've got that done, you got to go in, sneak in there, and you go up to the tippy-toppest top story, and you find the princess. So Jack managed to sneak in through a little crack, and he ran up the stairs. He was looking around, trying to find the way up. By and by, he goes into what looked like a pretty important room. He creeps in, and there's a big old bed. Somebody's snoozing in the bed, and he walks up closer. He starts to see a big old beard. That must be the king. He looks over. There's a great big sword over the king's bed. So Jack thought, he started to get a little bit of an idea. He went over, and he very carefully lifted up the sword and brought it back out through the door, and then he kept going. Any stair he could find, he kept going. Go. Up until he got to the tippy-toppest top story. And then sure enough, he goes into this door. There's the princess, sleeping her up in the bed. Well, she was really beautiful. Jack just immediately he just thought, wow, she just looks like someone you'd just love to just get to know and spend a little bit of time with. You could just tell that just by looking at her. And he thought, well, I got to do something about this. So he goes over and he calls out to the giant. He said, she's in here. So the giant said, now, I'm going to put up a ladder. You're doing good. I'm going to climb up and you pass her out to me. So Jack said, okay, very good. So the giant came up a bit closer and bit closer. He's getting higher. Jack sees the big hands on the ladder starting to shake. The ladder's starting to shake with the weight. And as he gets closer, Jack says, now, she's heavy, so you're going to have to stick your head in through the window and help me out with her. So, of course, the giant sticks his head in through the window. He didn't know Jack had a sword, and Jack, of course, does the same to him as he did to the other two, whacks off his head. And off goes the giant's head and falls down, and he falls out through the window and all this. And Jack says, well, I better get out of this. So he climbs down that ladder. He goes back to the giant's place. Well, when he's there, he finds all this old gold that must be from people who was waylaid. And he thought, well, I suppose I can use this for to help out my mother and father. So he takes some of that, leaves the rest for whoever else comes along. Only takes what he can carry, and he goes on, and then goes back to the settlement and shows up with lots of gold and everything to keep them, help keep them all well fed during the winter. And anyway, to celebrate, when they had a little bit of food, they all sat down, just like in Anita's story, at a great tin table. But the tables bended, so my story's ended. And if it had been stronger, my story might have been longer. And if they don't have good luck, then may all of ye. So that's a little story about Jack that I kind of picture in this sort of landscape, which here is a lot of bogs and mountains. Here on the west coast of Newfoundland, a lot of bogs and mountains and coastal plains and things like that. A lot of limestone cliffs and everything, almost like you'd see in Connemara or something maybe. And do I have time to play just a quick tune?
Yes, you do. Carry on.
Okay, I thought I'd try to play you something. Okay. This is, of course, an instrument that is you probably have all seen before many times. And anyway, but I thought I'd play some of a couple of local tunes on the tin whistle. And the people have played this. They play it here a lot now, and some of the older people did too. But a lot of the old dance tunes here they started off on probably on violin at some point, or violin as older people here would call it. And then accordion, button accordion is big here as well. But also people sang it. So anytime people can sing it, then they can just go from instrument to instrument, like, so a lot of people would sing chin music, they call, for dances as well. And people still do square dances and stuff here. And this is the kind of tunes. It's a little bit like an Irish polka kind of vibe to it. So I'll just finish off with these tunes, if that's okay. This one is called Hughie Wenzel's tune. And Wenzel is a name here from Portland Creek. And then the other one is Israel Got a Rabbit. And Israel being a first name that you'll find sometimes here in Newfoundland, on the West Coast certainly. And they got a rabbit. People hunt rabbits here. So Israel Got a Rabbit. And Hughie Wenzel's tune starting off. Here we go. Thanks again for inviting me. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
And we really enjoyed it too. That was absolutely lovely. So I'm just going to stop the recording.